them at the worst parts, the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and I'm never funny. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at a comic book movie that was poorly received upon release, but challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. And this week, we are talking about Timecop. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by the protector of all comic book timelines, Andrew Williams. Are you ready for this one, Andrew?
That's a lofty title. I don't know if I'm.
It's
up
a lot
for
of
that
responsibility
one.
on your shoulders,
It is.
Andrew.
There's a lot of timelines. But no, Timecop is awesome, so I'm stoked about this.
Yeah, I mean, as we say in the intro, the show can be a challenge because we only focus on the positives, and the movies we take a look at aren't very well received, which means it can be hard to find the positives normally. But this movie, as you said, is kind of awesome. It's weird that it qualifies for our show in almost any metric you look at, but hey, I'm glad it does. We get to talk about Jean-Claude Van Damme on Best of the Rest. This is a little dream come true.
This is like Christmas 10 months early, really. Like this is the dream.
We've covered Sylvester Stallone because we did Judge Dredd. Now we can talk about Jean-Claude Van Damme. Is there a way Arnold makes his way onto our show?
Did. We did Batman and Robin.
You're absolutely right. We've talked about Arnold. Okay, we're closing a chapter.
I can't believe you've done this.
The disrespect. I'm sorry.
Also, we could do the Conan sequel. I think that would qualify.
Okay. Only the sequel, though. That first one, it's untouchable. It's a masterpiece.
I don't remember. Well, I don't remember if it was received well or not. I don't. My memory's not that good. But yes.
But those are the three, right? You think of like 80s and 90s action stars. I mean, Arnold's at the top.
Yeah.
Stallone's right behind him. Third's got to be Jean-Claude, right?
Yeah. He's the kind of. I mean, he's definitely the third, but I think he's
definitely a tier below.
Yeah,
he doesn't have have a Terminator. He doesn't have a Rocky. He doesn't have that huge blockbuster franchise. But everybody knows who he is.
Which should have been this, but unfortunately,
it's the trio of muscle-bound action stars of the 80s and 90s that are all kind of hard to understand, but we look past it. Is that safe to say?
Yeah.
Andrew, what is your history with Timecop? I'm assuming you've seen it before.
Absolutely.
Preparing for this episode,
yeah, 100%. It's a movie that like I remember my dad talking about, like when we were talking about like time travel movies as a kid. Like you watch Bill and Ted, and my dad would always talk about Timecop, and he spoiled the ending for me.
Sure.
Which like he always mentioned what happened at the end of the movie, which we'll talk about later. But I then watched it later, and I probably like was in one ear out the other when I was like in that phase of like just like dozens of movies a week almost, where I was watching like constantly. I was watching like everything. But there was a show Jean-Claude Van Damme did a couple of years ago called Jean-Claude Van Johnson, where he played a version of himself. But in the opening narration, he like would describe like himself, and he would be like, "That's me, Jean-Claude Van Damme. You may remember me from such movies as Bloodsport or Timecop," which is like Looper, but way better.
Awesome.
And so when he said that, I was like, man, I do really like Looper, but I need to go back and rewatch Timecop. And I rewatched it a few years ago, and I was like, yeah, this still slaps. This is awesome.
Well, what's the verdict, Andrew? What's better, Looper or Timecop?
Don't do that to me.
Which movie has the better splits?
I mean, obviously, this one's got the better splits and some creative, ridiculous ways for him to do it. It is so amazing.
Not to jump too far ahead, but one of my notes is just Jean-Claude Van Damme's legs.
Yep.
That's it.
I guess if we're talking other 80s, 90s action stars, Bruce Willis might be the fourth. And he gets Looper. So
yeah,
I don't know if we'll ever work.
But he's so easy to understand, though. I don't know if he really fits in.
Yeah, he doesn't fit in. He
seems like a jerk, and these other three guys I find very inspirational.
Yeah. Bruce Willis.
I mean, hashtag positivity podcast, but I got mixed feelings on Bruce Willis.
Hashtag positivity podcast, but screw that guy. But no, Jean-Claude Van Damme's legs in this movie, they go to some great lengths to like have him needlessly kick and do the splits, and it's amazing. I burst out. I'll talk about it later. Like I burst out laughing at one of them. I thought it was so ridiculous, but also perfect.
I've got no doubt they rewrote some action scenes once he was cast. Like, we got Jean-Claude in here? Hang on.
We got to figure this out.
Get some kicks in there. Personally, I had never seen this movie before, at least not beginning to end. Jean-Claude Van Damme, I feel like, just by virtue of growing up in the 90s with cable television, I've seen parts of every single movie he's ever been in. Every time I watch a Jean-Claude movie, I'm like, this seems familiar. Have I seen this? Have I seen parts of it? But sitting down and watching it beginning to end, this is certainly the first time I watched Timecop. I'm familiar with that cover, that poster. I saw it in, Blockbuster growing up on the shelves, whatever. But this week I sat down and watched it. I'm glad I did. As I've mentioned already, I'm a big fan of old JCVD here. Watched a few of his movies here recently, and I'm glad to add this one to that list of movies I've seen. Maybe not the top Jean-Claude movie for me.
I'd say it's in the upper reaches, but I don't know if I put it at the top.
Universal Soldier is pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome, and he's got a few. I think JCVD is a little underrated. I think people sleep on him a little too much. He's got some bangers out there.
I think it's fair. I think it's a fair assessment. But look, we're here to talk about Timecop specifically, the movie that was released September 16th in 1994. Made on a budget of $27 million. At the box office, it's a big hit. It brings in $101 million. Andrew, this is the highest grossing Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. Isn't that wild? I
think it's the highest grossing lead actor Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. I think he's been in a few others. Yeah.
Sure.
Because he's the villain.
It's a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, whatever, he's the lead. That's a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. He's in one of the Expendables, right? Like, I wouldn't call that a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. He cameos in Last Action Hero.
Well, right. He's literally in Last Action Hero for like 4 seconds. But
it's a good 4 seconds, though.
It is a good 4 seconds. But no, it's 101 million. That's kind of interesting that's like when it's just him selling the movie. That's as high as it gets. That's a little strange. Maybe not strange. I don't really know what, society was feeling about him at the time, but he's got this legacy that you would have felt like he could have been like a $200-300 million guy by default, but apparently not.
Meanwhile, freaking Bruce Willis gets to phone in 5 Die Hard sequels, and they all make millions of dollars. What are you doing,
They all
America?
make over $100 million. Come on, guys. We should have had like 9 Timecops. This is the genre and the plot point that keeps on giving. You can do this forever.
All right, I can't wait to talk about this movie. Let's get through setting the stage here, because I keep feeling myself wanting to start talking about some of these scenes. Here's the thing. America got this one wrong. Rotten Tomatoes, the critic score is just 44%. Well below mixed territory. Critics were not feeling it. And Andrew, the audience score in this movie is 36%. It's lower than the critics.
Guys.
Isn't that wild?
I've done a lot of call to arms on this show. But at this point, just assume every week, no matter what movie we're talking about, we need you guys to go bump the audience score at this point.
I mean, 36 is pretty low. Mystery Men was like just shy of being certified fresh on the audience side. I feel like we could maybe bump that one up. This one needs a lot of work. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what jaded people are going and reviewing Timecop on Rotten Tomatoes, giving it such a low score, but come on.
Terrifying. This is... Guys... We need to fix this too. Like, come on.
So the movie, I'm guessing we've got a few listeners that are going to be surprised to see that we're talking about Timecop, because this isn't the first movie that comes to mind when you think about comic book movies. And it wasn't until we started researching and prepping for titles for this show that I personally realized this was technically a comic book movie. It's not based on an ongoing comic. It's based on essentially a short story that was first published in a Dark Horse anthology comic. So that story was created by Mike Richardson, written by Mark Verheiden, and drawn by Ron Randall. Now, this movie is written by Mark Verheiden with a story credit by Mike Richardson. So the people that brought us that original story are the ones that brought us the movie. It's not like they did the story and handed it off to a quote-unquote legit movie screenwriter. They handled
Right.
that process entirely themselves, which is pretty cool.
It is. Mike Richardson has been involved in Dark Horse Comics for a long time. He might still be. He was the editor-in-chief at one point. But he
My notes
occasionally...
say he was the founder, actually.
And there you go. So, and obviously Dark Horse Comics has done many, many things over the years, notably Hellboy. It's probably the most notable comic they've published in their history, but Mike Richardson has been there from pretty much day one. Mark Verheiden is another guy who's stuck around comics for a long time. I remember seeing his name growing up on a variety of different things. So, I did notice that, like, watching the credits, I was like, oh, they got the guys to come in and do this, which like you said, a lot of times, like, even in situations like Hellboy, the creators write a script and then the studios get involved and they hand it off to other people to rewrite it because they have their own ideas of what it should be. But in this case, maybe with I don't know if 27 million could be considered small budget at the time. There was a little less stringency, or maybe there wasn't as high expectations for it to be like a tent pole. But I'm glad those guys got a chance to write that script themselves.
Now, Andrew, Ron Randall, he drew the original story. Do you think he gets compensated for the movie? I know this has come up on the show before, but I don't have a definitive answer for this, and it bothers me. So I just ask you as if you somehow know. Do you think Ron Randall got paid for this movie?
I honestly wouldn't know. We've talked in the past about how kind of that's a studio discretion kind of thing. Because Dark Horse is something where it's a creator-owned situation. But it's interesting that in the credits, the comic book is not credited to Mike Richardson, Mark Verheiden, and Ron Randall. It's only credited to Mike Richardson and Mark Verheiden.
Interesting.
And I did think that was interesting. I thought it was interesting the artist was not included. So it very well may have been that, like, they just paid him to draw this story they had. I don't know. I would like to hope that he got something.
Yeah, Ron, I know you're listening. Ron. Yeah. If you want to reach out to us on in either maybe clear the air, let us know you are fairly compensated. Or if you want to, air some laundry and get the word out there, some grievances out there. Yeah, we'll bring you on for that. We
got you. Well, if you know Ron Randall and you think he might be behind on listening and needs to get this message sooner, please let him know. The lines are open, folks.
Now, Mark Verheiden, he wrote the original story and the script for this movie, as we said. However, this wasn't his first venture into screenwriting. He actually has a story credit on The Mask, which is another movie that I think a lot of people will be surprised to learn is based on a comic. Pretty loosely based on a comic, but that idea does come from a comic. After this movie, he was involved in the Timecop TV show that came out in 1997, and he's got some credits on Smallville, Heroes, and Daredevil. So certainly, whenever they're adapting comic book movies or TV shows, Mark seems to be on the short list of guys to call up and come and help out, punch up some scripts, maybe direct a couple episodes.
Yeah, even more recently with the Constantine show with Matt Ryan, and even the most recent Swamp Thing show. He's still coming in, writing and directing episodes, producing. I think he might even be credited as a creator on that Swamp Thing show. So he's still definitely involved and kind of set himself up as one of those kind of go-to guys if you're doing a comic book thing.
Now, the movie is directed by Peter Hyams, who had a number of credits to his name before this movie, but not a lot of high-profile director gigs. However, after this, he makes Sudden Death, also with Jean-Claude Van Damme, and goes on to direct End of Days, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. I did not see any Sylvester Stallone credits there, so he only got 2 out of 3. But you know what? As Meatloaf would say, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. R.A.P. Meatloaf.
I'd actually seen a couple of things he'd done before this, one of which is ironically the sequel to 2001 that they made it was made in 84 or 84 was when 2010 came out, and a good 10 plus years after the original. Also directed a science fiction murder mystery starring Sean Connery in 1981 called Outland.
Well, that sounds... I'm sold. What is that?
Yeah, it's
science fiction murder mystery starring Sean Connery. That sounds amazing. Yeah, so he
plays. It's pretty good. It's set on one of Jupiter's moons, and it's actually been called like a space western too. But he kind of plays this security officer at this like mining station on one of Jupiter's moons, and people start turning up dead, and he's the guy that gets called in to kind of sort it out. So it's an odd like middle territory Sean Connery, like post James Bond, pre Last Crusade era there. So I actually like it a lot.
Andrew, can we just pause this recording? I gotta go watch this. We can come back afterwards. I'm not gonna be able to think about anything else unless I get this out of. I gotta exercise.
It's pretty good. Like, I think Peter Boyle's in it too. He plays one of the kind of executives or guys at the space station. But yeah, I definitely, if you've not watched Outland, I definitely recommend it. I wouldn't watch it with the kids, much like I wouldn't watch Timecop with the kids. But yeah, I like that one a lot. That was another
okay.
one.
Well, hey, I'll be right back. We can continue this.
All right, we'll pick this up later.
Well, Andrew, you're right. That movie's awesome. Let's continue with our talk about Timecop.
All right, sounds good.
In 1994, Agent Max Walker of the Time Enforcement Commission is attacked at his home. His wife is killed when his house explodes, and he is left for dead. 10 years later, he is now a veteran of the TEC, an organization tasked with protecting the timeline from anyone traveling into the past to make changes for personal gain. After taking down his former partner, he learns that Senator McComb, who overlooks the TEC, has been using time travel to accrue wealth for his presidential campaign and seeks to dismantle the TEC and keep the time travel technology for himself. When he catches Senator McComb in the act, his new partner, Agent Fielding, double-crosses him as she was paid off by Senator McComb. Agent Walker makes one last attempt to stop McComb's plan by traveling to 1994, a mission that brings him back to his own home at the time of his wife's murder.
If that synopsis doesn't get you invested in this like immediately, I don't know what will.
There is, I guess, spoilers we talk about anyway, there's a moment where there's two different versions of Jean-Claude kicking butt at the same time. What more
I'm not joking when I say this is the greatest film of all time.
In typical time travel fashion, it gets a little convoluted, but you watch the movie, it's pretty straightforward. It's not the most, I wouldn't call it mind-blowing or mind-melting time travel. You know, it's not.
No. I don't think there's anything here that gets too heady. There's some cool narrative choices that they make, like the way it kind of all comes together at the end, I think is, pretty well done overall. But yeah, I don't think any of this is like, this isn't, what's the one I'm thinking of?
It's not like Primer. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like Primer where you like, if you like sneeze, you've missed too much of the movie, so you have to go back.
All right. Well, first thing we're going to do is talk about the cast of this movie. And Andrew, you know what we're going to do. We're going to start with the best casting, the best performance of the movie. Every episode, we recognize one actor or actress who has gone so far above and beyond the Call of Duty that they've raised the quality of the entire film with their performance, or at least the quality of the role that they were given. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, kick us off. Who gets your Mark Strong Award for Timecop?
Jean-Claude Van Damme gets my Mark Strong Award for Timecop.
Of course he does. Who else could it be?
There's no question. Now, don't get me wrong. We got a pretty good sniveling little villain here that's doing his job. But this is genuinely like, and it's not like an ironic thing either. I just think Jean-Claude is good in this movie. I think it's a solid script that I think is the biggest thing. Because, you get a lot of guys where they're doing like these kind of direct-to-video movies, and the script's just not there. But this one has the script, it's got the chops, and Jean-Claude Van Damme just fits very well into this role. And I think he's doing a great job here. He gets the cool action sequences. Like I said, they work in needlessly creative ways for him to do the splits and use his very high kicking abilities. They really get creative with that. But yeah, and then like you said, at the big final fight at the end, you get two Jean-Claude Van Dammes running around beating people up. Like, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, he, in true Mark Strong Award fashion, elevates this movie. You put someone else in there who doesn't have the martial arts acumen, who can't pull off these action scenes and elevate them and make them more memorable, and you've still got a solid sci-fi movie, but throw in old Jean-Claude Camille Francois Van Varenberg, a.k.a. Jean-Claude Van Damme, a.k.a. the Muscles from Brussels, which is a stupid nickname because it makes you mispronounce the city he's from. Throw him in there, and you've got yourself a true 90s sci-fi classic as
You do.
the lead of this movie, Agent Max Walker. Which, going back, I think we've said this about Arnold. It's hilarious, again, that he's got a very notable accent. Clearly not born in America. And they give him these all-American names. This is Max.
This is Max Walker. Like, they give him the most American male-sounding name possible.
But it's great. I mean, it's Jean-Claude Van Damme at the peak of his powers.
He's doing great here.
Not number one mullet. I think Hard Target might be my favorite Jean-Claude main.
Yeah, Hard Target. You can't go wrong with Hard Target.
It's got the length. It's got the wetness. It's got the curls. It's got everything.
Yeah, it's got all that stuff.
But this one's pretty good. The movie starts off in 1994, and we see basically Jean-Claude in 1994. I mean, his hair, the way he dresses. And then when it jumps forward to 2004, the movie makes a lot of ambitious guesses as far as where the world will be in 2004. And his hair is like a shorter version of his 1994 hair. They don't get too crazy with the hair. But
it's a little bit longer. In 94, it's like well coiffed. In 2004, it's like a little shaggier. That's it. It's legit like it's like, all right, he grew his hair out some. That's how he's aged.
Well, let's talk about the rest of this cast, all doing a great job. Just like Ron Silver, who plays our villain, Senator McComb. And while you said he does a great job playing the villain, this is definitely a Andrews Mark Strong Award pick type villain. But I was still betting on you picking Jean-Claude Van Damme because he's just so undeniable in this movie. But this performance is definitely right up your alley, Andrew.
Oh yeah, he's chewing the scenery. He's a guy that's literally trying to co-opt the entirety of the world's time travel technology so that only he can use it and benefit from it. It's like it's such a like twirling mustache type take on this kind of villain where it's like, no, all the time travel is for me and me only. Ha ha ha. Like, and he's doing it to make money, which just seems so like there's so many
the most
things.
Boring use of time travel.
It is.
I can travel anywhere. I can get money.
It's like I can get money, but then like he's using it all. Like, so if you get in his way, he'll use it for that. But like by and large, he's just using it to make money. And it's like, well, gee, it feels so easy to. It's like he's like using time travel, and they're like, you're still running out of money. And I'm like, then you're really bad at this. But like,
yes.
Like he's got a guy in the 20s, and it's like, how did you not just manipulate the stock market to make $200 million? But
Biff does a better job at making money with time travel than you.
100%. It's ridiculous. But even still, like, just even regardless of that, this guy is chewing the scenery. He's got scenes where he's like berating himself in the past, and like it's geez, lay off the candy bars, will you? But like just stuff like that where it's like so ridiculous. And like obviously the ending where they're face to face and like that big thing happens again. We'll talk about that later. But like he's chewing the scenery. I'll be honest, I don't really know Ron Silver from anything else. Nothing's coming to mind. I know he's been out, he's like a journeyman type actor that's been out there doing stuff for decades. But in this one, he weirdly at certain points he just reminds me of like a slightly more serious Jeremy Jam from Parks and Rec, like just the way his look is and the way he talks.
Yeah.
But especially when he's like the fully formed version in the future, but like he's got the same hair sometimes, same beard. But yeah, it's definitely up my alley. I definitely liked it a lot, but I can't, I can't go wrong. I can't go against Jean-Claude on this one. I can't do it. But fantastic.
He got the bad guy scar down his face by the end of the movie. But even without that, the slicked back hair. So there's a scene early in the movie when government officials are talking about time travel. It's been invented. We have the technology. So we need to make an organization to monitor this. And he's talking to like a board of senators.
Like
and
a
the
Senate
president.
committee, yeah.
Right. And they're like, so who's going to be in charge of this? And he goes, I will. And the camera pans over to him. And I'm watching the movie with friend of the show, my wife, and it pans over to him, and he's got slicked back hair. He's got a 5 o'clock shadow. She goes, oh, he's the bad guy. Just right away. Like,
Not even hiding it. And to be fair, you find that out pretty early on that he's the bad guy. So it's not a huge, it's not necessarily a secret, but yeah, you definitely, this guy's intentions from like day one.
Also in this movie, we have Mia Sara as Melissa Walker, Max Walker's wife, who is seemingly killed at the beginning of this movie and is a driving force to him to continue his work and eventually, maybe, save her life. Does he succeed? We'll see.
Just maybe. But yeah, so no, she has a pretty important part to play here. Definitely playing the damsel role in certain parts. I'm not going to pretend, that she's not. Obviously, probably notably known as Sloane Peterson from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and also Legend, if you've seen Legend. But yeah, she sits out a good chunk of the middle of the movie here when the plot kind of all finally forms, but she gets some good stuff at the beginning and then gets to play a pretty big part in the finale as well. So good stuff.
And yeah, and it would not be a stranger to comic book roles, as she was in the Birds of Prey TV show in 2002 and got to play the one and only Dr. Harleen Quinzel. Harley Quinn.
Probably the first live action.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
That is. People don't talk about it enough.
Yeah, I agree. She does a good job here. There's some scenes where she's really not given a whole lot to do other than be the wife of the hero. But at the end of the movie, she kind of gets involved with the actual plot and the save the day, last ditch effort by our hero, and gets to actually hold her own against the villain and do a few things. So kudos to her for that.
Yep.
Good job, Mia.
Yes, good for you. Bruce
McGill is in this movie. He is the commander. He's in charge of the TEC. He's Commander Matuzak. I think is how you say his last name.
Yeah.
Matuzak.
Hell of a name. Matuzak, yeah.
Yeah. And they weren't making it easy for Jean-Claude. These names he had to pronounce. But definitely he's on that list of actors that you might not know the name, but you know his face. I certainly recognized him in this movie. I don't know from what exactly, but I was like, oh, it's that guy.
Yeah, it's that guy. Like, I remember him from, like, obviously he's in My Cousin Vinny. People probably remember him as, like, the lead sheriff in My Cousin Vinny. He was in, I remember him from a movie called The Last Boy Scout. I don't know how well known that movie actually is. Seems to be on the lower list.
It doesn't have anybody significant in a starring role.
No, it has, what's that guy's name? We were just talking about him.
Some C-list action
Bruce
guy.
Willis, I think his name is. Then he was also in a bunch of Michael Mann movies. Talking back about Bruce McGill now, not Bruce Willis. But he was in The Insider, Ali, and Collateral, which, personal favorite.
That's a good one.
He shows up in all those. But he's definitely a character actor type guy who's just they need a bit part and they need somebody to give an above average performance. You call Bruce McGill.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically playing like police commissioner that you might see in a non-sci-fi movie. Like Jean-Claude Van Damme is onto this conspiracy, and he's like, "I believe you, but you need the evidence." It's very much that role. He's not playing it quite that hokey, and he's also best friends with Jean-Claude Van Damme. That kind of springs up later in the storyline. Apparently, they've had dinner together and stuff, and they're like personal friends. But at any rate, he does a great job. He helps save the day. He sacrifices his life at one point, but it's of course undone because it's time travel. But a good performance. I definitely dug it.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff does get set up. The script, like I said, I think the script for this movie is actually pretty smart overall. But yeah, he's absolutely doing what's asked of him here. Slightly more even.
Rounding out our cast, we have Gloria Rubin, who plays Agent Sarah Fielding. She is Jean-Claude Van Damme's new partner after his old partner crosses over to the dark side and Jean-Claude has to take him down. So she steps into the role. She's a rookie in the TEC, and she herself also betrays Jean-Claude's character and gets in. Then she doubles back to be a good guy and helps save the day. I was watching this movie and I was like, for a time travel movie, it's not that convoluted. I'm following it, but now that we're sitting down and like describing it and kind of walking through the faces, like, there's a lot going on here. So definitely like a varied performance. She's got to play a lot of shades, and I think she rises to the occasion. Good job.
I agree. I think she does. Like you said, she's part of the internal affairs section of the TEC that's kind of brought in when it turns out that Jean-Claude Van Damme's partner turned, essentially. So now they're kind of concerned that maybe Jean-Claude might turn. So she's brought in to kind of shadow him on one of his missions where they go back and kind of they find Senator McComb trying to stop himself from exiting this company before it gets super rich and, make more money again. So boring. Just make your money once, man. You can do it. But now, and then because it basically turns out that, McComb is threatening these people, that if they don't side with him, he will use his time travel to basically wipe their families from existence, which is pretty brutal, honestly. It's because it's not just I'm going to kill you. I'm going to make sure you never existed. And that's some heavy stuff. But, and obviously it holds a lot of power to people. I think that's almost completely how he gets people on his side. And so she does a good job here. Not a huge performance. Only a couple of big scenes here, but good stuff.
Also, Donna Stranger to other comic book adaptations. She was on the Flash TV show before this movie.
That's where I knew her from.
And much more recently was on Cloak and Dagger.
Yes.
Have you seen that one, Andrew? Cloak and Dagger? I've heard a lot of things, but never sat down and watched it. No?
I've heard pretty good things overall, that it was a pretty good time. But I have not seen it. One day, maybe. There's so much to watch.
There's too much content in the world.
When I could just watch Timecop again.
Well, Andrew, I think it's time to jump into the scenes of this movie. And specifically, we're going to start with our favorite scene of the movie, as we always do. Andrew, kick us off. In your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene of Timecop?
I've got to go with the finale. The finale is awesome. The whole movie is awesome, but if you're forcing me to pick one slice of that awesomeness,
which I am,
it is definitely the finale. So basically, the setup is Jean-Claude is like convinced. Jean-Claude basically has a big scuff up with Senator McComb, goes back to the present, and we've got like the Biff timeline from '85. McComb is now super popular. He's running everything. He's in charge of everything. He's shutting down the TEC. Everything is awful. So Jean-Claude Max himself convinces his boss and guys to send him back one last time to try to fix it, or at least stop him. And so they drop him back in 1994. Lo and behold, like the day before, the day of when his wife is killed. And we find out that his wife's death in the first place was McComb getting back at him from the future just before Jean-Claude ever knew that he was on McComb's radar. And so we get the same kind of sequence of events unfolds, but then we find out that future Jean-Claude is hanging out here as well. And then all of them, both Jean-Claude's and Mia Sara are kind of forced to fight for their lives on this Victorian-looking house. They're climbing all over the roofs. We got our peaks, we got the valleys, we got our spires and everything all over. It's raining, it's lightning, so we have a cool backdrop, cool effects. Looks awesome. We got two Jean-Claudes kicking people around. And at one point, Mia Sara gets to straight up blow somebody away with one of the guns. She just shoots him straight up through the roof of the house, and it's awesome. And then it ultimately culminates in this final confrontation where it's both Jean-Claude. Well, one Jean-Claude's outside, knocked out, and then we've got our villain, President-elect McComb, whatever he is at that point. And Jean-Claude reveals his ace up the sleeve, which is where he left a message for the younger McComb to join them at the house, which is about to blow up. So Jean-Claude,
so if the young McComb dies, because old McComb doesn't care about dying, because young McComb is still going to go on to do all this stuff. But if young McComb also dies, then all McComb is erased from the timeline.
Right.
Again, stuff that seems straightforward until you try to say it out loud.
Yeah, or until you start trying to think about it. You start trying to practically, what does that actually mean? And yeah, it messes the whole thing. But one of the big things they keep stressing throughout this movie is that if you end up in a place with a younger version of yourself, do not touch that person because the same matter is not allowed to occupy the same space at the same time.
Which I love that. They say it so matter-of-factly, like it's in the TEC manual. Like, oh, as you know, the same matter can't occupy the same space at the same time. And they say that, and you as an audience are like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I guess I don't know too much about, cool quantum physics or whatever, but I get that. And then
Yeah, sure.
I don't even exactly know what it means until we see it on screen. So, Andrew, what exactly happens here?
So basically, the elder Macomb is about to blow up this house and essentially recreate the events of what happened the first time. But when the younger Macomb shows up, he stops and he's like, "Oh, well, you've made a real mess here now," which is weird because he doesn't just tell the other guy to leave. Which I'm like, you could have just done that, bud. But
not enough time, Andrew. Clock's ticking.
Not enough time. Clock's ticking. So eventually, there's a scuffle, and Jean-Claude throws the younger Macomb at the older Macomb, and they merge and then melt. They can't, them being present together essentially cancels them both out. It's this weird, the CG ain't exactly there, but it's this weird, they morph together and you get some weird kind of looking body horror type stuff, but then they just eventually, it's not even they form into a monster. They just kind of form together and then just dissipate and evaporate, and they're gone. And yeah, bad stuff. So
I did not know where it was going. He throws them into the other one. They start merging, and then like you said, it's like body horror. They turn red almost immediately, become one figure, one mass, and there's these stretched out faces. But then it moves on to just being a lava lamp.
Yeah.
Right? We got
For
just
lack
a
of a
big
better word,
red
yeah.
blob. It's sort of like the Capri Sun commercials from the 90s where the kids turn into silver, but it's red. And then a puddle on the ground that
and then it just disappears.
Disappears. And yeah, the quality of that CG. My exact note whenever that was happening is, what in the bowling alley video is this? When you get a strike at the bowling alley and there's some stupid animation. We're talking about that level.
Yeah,
of
that's
CG,
kind of stuff here.
Which we haven't seen a lot of throughout this movie. There's obviously some CG, like when they're time traveling and they sort of ripple into a scene. There's some effects, but nothing that really stands out too much until this at the very end. It reminds me. We recently watched Blade 1, the original, in the Discord, and a movie I very much love. But at the end of that movie, it suddenly goes really hard into CG, which it hadn't been doing most of the movie, and it always kind of stands out. Some of the deaths at the end, some of the skeletons with the wings scene of that movie. It's oh, okay, we're showing our age a bit with the CG. That happens in this movie here, and it's awesome. I love it. It's so good. And then obviously that means our heroes have essentially saved the day, but they have effectively done what he was afraid of, where they have now wiped Macomb from existence, and he gets to go back to his essentially happy ending now, not realizing that his wife's death in the first place was a manipulation of the timeline. So that itself gets undone. So that's kind of the nice part of it is, it avoids that kind of pitfall of rigging the future for your benefit by revealing that the tragedy was part of the manipulation. And I think that was a kind of clever way to get around that without kind of having to do the whole, well, you used the time, used it to your benefit, but we're going to let this one go. Ha ha ha. But, we avoid all that here. So, yeah, I'm looking at you, Back to the Future. That's what I'm talking about. But yeah, I love it. It's a fantastic action set piece. We're at this house. Cool set, cool setting, obviously with the lightning and everything, and just cool fights. Everything's awesome. This is it's the perfect culmination to this movie. I agree. It's an awesome climax, awesome action scene, great fights. All great points. That house is awesome. It is a very cool looking house, very distinct. They use it for everything. There's fight scenes. They literally blow it up in the beginning of the movie. The camera, you can tell, they love this house. It's constantly panning around the outside and really showing you the beauty of this house. It's great. It's not what I picked as my favorite scene of the movie, But that just means that there's a lot of awesome scenes in this movie. The scene I'm going to go with is the first time that Agent Walker confronts McComb and really has him like seemingly dead to rights. It almost seems like the movie's wrapping up, but it's only like an hour in, so we know there's more to come. But he catches up to him in the past. He catches old McComb visiting young McComb, doing the deals, and he's there with his new partner, Agent Fielding. So he has a witness. They're going to have him dead to rights, and it's in Andrew. It's in a warehouse. We get an action scene in a big warehouse. You know what that means. Any 80s or 90s movie, you're going all out. Stuff's going to be going down. What is this warehouse? What is this factory? What is the machine? Who cares? It's now props for an awesome action scene.
It is.
So here's how it all gets set up. And Andrew, we talk about the screenwriting of this movie. There is incredible dialogue, legitimately awesome dialogue just a masterclass of dialogue writing in this scene here, okay? So here's how it starts off. He's pointing a gun at McComb, okay? And he says, freeze, as cops do, right? And McComb says, do you realize how inappropriate that word is? Do I look frozen to you? Which is kind of... It's not the best comeback. It's kind of strange, but it's the bad guy just kind of blowing him off, being a smartass. He's not sweating it, even though there's a gun pointed at him. And the reason he's not sweating it is because he knows that Agent Fielding is on his payroll, and she's going to double cross Agent Walker. Okay. Let me get to why this dialogue is so amazing. There's a bunch of great action I'm going to talk about, but let's jump forward a bit to Agent Walker taking out one of McComb's thugs. They're up on a scaffolding, and there's a big tank of nitroglycerin that takes a bullet and starts leaking onto the scaffolding. And it's an action movie. We know where this is going. Agent Walker kicks the bad guy into all the nitroglycerin that's leaking out, and it freezes half of his body. And it's a super cool special effect. He looks over at him. His right arm is clearly frozen, stuck in like an upright position. And Jean-Claude Van Damme gives him a big kick, because that's what JCVD does, and it obliterates the frozen half of his body. His arm just shatters. So you have this guy with one arm. He falls backwards over the scaffolding, falls a great distance onto like these light panels that explode, and it's clearly like a dummy that's thrown down, which just makes it all the better. And I took a note of this because the guy falls to his death. It's a big dramatic kill, right? And then Jean-Claude Van Damme looks over the scaffolding. He looks down at him, and he just kind of does this face like, oof. He doesn't say oof. He doesn't say anything. He just goes, And then he moves on. And it just stood out to me because I was like, that kind of death, there should be a quip. Like action movies tell me that you should like say something there. Like, oh, have a nice fall or something stupid like that, right? But he says nothing. And he rounds the corner and comes face to face with McComb. And they have a standoff. And what he says here to McComb is, I know, I should have said freeze. And I was like, oh, they planned this from the beginning. I'm being worked, brother. So it's a payoff to that very first thing McComb says about how dumb it is to say freeze, that he's not actually frozen. And then he actually freezes the guy, and he doesn't use the obvious quip, but he comes face to face with McComb, and he's sort of breaking the fourth wall by saying, I should have said freeze, which is the quip. It's beautiful. I was like, I had my hands on my head. I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. That is
genuinely fantastic.
It's so good. This whole action scene is great. That bit of writing there is probably the reason I'm putting it as my favorite, because like I said, I got played. I was like, they missed an opportunity for a quip, but nope, they're doubling up. They are giving me that much better of a payoff in the very next scene. It was awesome. And other than that, the action is great. There's it's an action scene in a warehouse, which means we're using like a forklift that he puts into drive, and then he's crouching down behind it to avoid bullets, and then he gets onto the pallet that it's lifting, and even though no one's driving it, it lifts him up as we move. He's ducked behind some barrels that are on the pallet that are taking the bullets. That's what gets him up to the scaffolding. Just all the good creative stuff you can do with a warehouse that these movies love doing. It delivers the goods. There's a lot of faceless goons that can't seem to hit our heroes, but they get taken out by Jean-Claude Van Damme's bullets. It's fantastic.
It's awesome. It's a really good fight scene. And that line is so good. Like when that happened, I was just like, it was like chef's kiss. Just beautiful. That might be the best like genuine dialogue exchange in any of Jean-Claude Van Damme's movies. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's better overall movies, but I don't know if any of the moments of any of the dialogue tops that. But yeah, this is a great scene. It's meant to be at this like computer chip warehouse or something, because like this is the guy that like designs all the computers at the TEC that McComb like cashed out of right before it got super popular and famous. And so yeah, like the thing he falls on is supposed to be some massive like computer type thing. Who knows? Like you said, who cares? It's just a prop to be exploded at that point. It's like when you're watching a thing and like, you know, it's like the joke when like in Wayne's World 2 where they pass by like the moving plate glass across the street and all the, like the vendor setups. It's like, you know, it's all going to blow up later. It doesn't matter what it's for or what it does. So this is great. And yeah, you get some good villain scenery chewing stuff here where he's talking to a younger version of himself. You get the double cross by Fielding. You get just tons of great stuff here. And it's, yeah, not the top of the mountain for me, but I can't at all fault you for picking it as the top of the mountain. It's a good one.
I mean, there's a lot of great overall action scenes. We just talked about maybe the two biggest in the movie. But there's also a lot of like little snippets, things that aren't quite big enough for me to say it's my favorite scene of the movie. But they're maybe a minute long. And if I was trying to sell someone on this movie, if somehow saying Jean-Claude is in a time-traveling action movie from the 90s doesn't sell you on it, if I have to show you something, there's a few of these that I would show as a clip to be like, look, you have to see this whole thing. One of them actually doesn't even involve Jean-Claude Van Damme. It's the opening scene of this movie, which takes place in 1863. It's during the Civil War. It ends with a man robbing a stagecoach with machine guns that have laser sights on them. And just the juxtaposition of the setting, the timeline, these guys on horses going down a muddy road in the rain, and then this dude just whips open his trench coat like he's in the Matrix and pulls out these machine guns. I'm like, this is awesome. I don't know why this is happening. I don't know how this feeds into the story, but this visual right here is so cool. Yeah, it's awesome.
It was.
So that's one of them. Another one comes in a shopping mall. It's a 1994. Here's where the movie is.
So we're in the quote unquote present.
Yes.
Of the time.
And Jean-Claude Van Damme, his character is a cop, and he just notices this guy on roller skates going through the mall, and he feels like he's up to no good. He's keeping an eye on him. And of course, this guy, this punk, this 90s jerk, you know, this 90s youth steals, he purse snatches an old lady. And to stop the man, Jean-Claude just stands in front of him. And he throws up his leg in a perfect, what is that, 105-degree angle? Yes. Just holding his leg up at face height. So the rollerblader has to come to a screeching halt right in front of his boot. And Jean-Claude Van Damme holds his leg up for the entire scene. Which, again, this is one of those scenes that had to have been written after he was cast. Because there's not a lot of people on this planet that can pull this off.
Do that, yeah.
And the skater guy, his face is right up to his boot. And again, we already went over my favorite dialogue in the movie, but this one's up there too. Jean-Claude Van Damme says, he points to his boot and says, "Read it." And it shows us the bottom of his boot. And there's the brand Wolverine. And so the skater goes, "Wolverine?" And Jean-Claude goes, "Between the lines." And the skater goes, "I should get the fuck out of here." And he's like, "Yeah, that purse doesn't look good on you." And he gets the purse back and the guy skates off. So stupid. So ridiculous.
That is so, like, I saw that and like legitimately like he puts up the foot to stop him and I was like, no way. Yes. I was like, it's happening. It really is what they're doing. This is the greatest. It's the most Jean-Claude Van Damme way of doing it.
You think he's gonna like maybe clothesline him with his boot out there, but the fact that he stops and they just have this dialogue exchange while he's got his leg lifted so far off the ground is just it's so awesome.
Fantastic.
Andrew. Whenever I say they don't make them like they used to, this is what I'm talking about. And it doesn't matter. That scene doesn't.
No.
The guy's not important. You cut that from the movie. Nothing changes. Except we lose out on this hilarious, awesome action scene.
Which is that's a bit of a crime. Scene. You could say that is a crime worthy of the TEC investigating. But they have to go back in time and find out why Jean-Claude Van Damme didn't star in this movie. But there's another moment like that I like, where you talk about like snippets. It's when he gets attacked at his apartment. This is like the first.
Yes.
This is the first like cognizant, like McComb is coming after him type moment. Because like at this point, he's gotten a few hints that McComb is up to something, and this is kind of McComb's first strike on him. So McComb has some guys attack him in his apartment. He's like asleep on his couch or something, and of course he's just in his boxers so that we can show off not just his muscled upper body, but his insanely thick, toned legs. Although you do get to see a lot more of him in this movie earlier on.
You do, yes.
So if you're a fan in that way, definitely check this out. But so he's fighting this. He eventually like is getting through everybody, slowly but surely working his way through them. But at one point, the last guy, again, appears like he's got him dead to rights. Like, he's got, like, a taser pointed at him. At this point, like, his water cooler, you remember when everybody's family used to have water coolers?
Right.
Because they apparently still have those in 2004. Gets knocked over, and it's, like, poured water all over the floor. And so this guy's pointing a taser at him, and he's like, I forget what he says. It's something...
I'll tell you what he says, because this isn't any normal taser. It fires like these huge like silver bullets on wires. What he says is 50,000 volts, motherfucker. Have a nice day.
And so he shoots the taser at Jean-Claude Van Damme, but at this point Van Damme has seen that the water has like gone over to like include his shoes. So Van Damme jumps up and does the splits over his counter in the kitchen, so the taser hits the water and shocks the dude to death. And I just, like, the minute, like, he jumped up and they, like, show him, and he's, like, it's like there's a corner, so he's got one of his feet on, like, each side, so he's, like, suspended in the middle, and I was like, that's awesome. I was like, that's the most ridiculous, plot-contrived way I can think of getting him to do the splits in a movie, but it's perfect. There's a scene in Jean-Claude Van Johnson where he's meant to be older in that show, and they do a joke sequence where he goes to do the splits to avoid something, but he doesn't split all the way because he's out of shape. So he like goes to split and he like stops halfway through and he's like, oh no, and then gets like punched in the face or something. And it's just like, in this one it was like, it's obviously this is meant to be like the full version, but just the idea that he just genuinely like launches himself into the air and then lands on his kitchen counters and the splits. I was like, awesome. I was like, this is fantastic. Like, it's exactly what I want out of Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah, I mean, you can't just jump up onto the counter. You can't just
that's
stand
ridiculous.
on the counter. You gotta do the splits. And again, he's in his boxers. The camera, he's got his back to the camera, so he does the splits. You see his toned legs. You see his hams that he's smuggling in those boxers. You see him look back over his shoulder with his muscled back, and it holds. I mean, they know this is the money shot. It holds it. It holds this view of him doing the splits. It cuts to the bad guy getting electrocuted. Cuts back to him. He's still up on the counter doing the splits, just holding this pose. It's fantastic.
It's like the same version of like the earlier scenes. So Van Damme's one of the only guys that could hold the splits for that long. He's one of the only guys that could hold a kick for that long. So they were just like, if we're gonna do it in this movie, linger as long as possible.
I haven't seen Jean-Claude Van Johnson. I need to watch that because that sounds hilarious. That he tries to use the splits to dodge a move and can't do it because, of course, that's the most practical way to dodge something. But how insane is it that Johnny Cage is a character very clearly based on Jean-Claude Van Damme? They have the same initials. He's a movie star who's very vain. He does the splits for a signature move. Like Johnny Cage is Jean-Claude Van Damme. And in the 90s, Jean-Claude Van Damme makes a video game movie, but it's Street Fighter. Why is he not Johnny Cage in Mortal Kombat? It was right there.
He's not just in Street Fighter. He plays the one person in Street Fighter that he does not meet any of the qualifications for playing.
Oh, you mean the all-American Guile with American flag tattoos on his shoulders?
And a giant blonde flat top? And let's get this guy from Europe with a thick accent and brown hair to play him. Fantastic.
Oh, man. Great movie, though.
Is it, though?
Man, maybe not for the quote-unquote right reasons, but I am entertained by watching it. Well, since we brought it up, though, real quick, though, Raul Julia, Mark Strong.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, easily.
Oh, yeah. Like, his performance as Bison is, like, unironically a genuinely great performance. Like, yes. He's giving that so much more than it ever deserved. And one of his last movies. Might be his last movie.
I think it is his last, yeah.
Unfortunate. Rest in peace, Raul Julia.
You know, we talked about that scene where they are explaining to the council that time travel technology has been invented. And is it the president that's giving him a hard time?
No, or is it just another senator. Okay.
Well, this guy's a real jerk. A lot of senators are jerks in this movie. But he says, time travel. Well, beam me up, Scotty.
It's not even right.
And do you think is Star Trek the first thing that comes to mind when you think of time travel? I mean, maybe the senator is just a huge fan of Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, which revolves
that genuinely
around time travel, but
just occurred to me that it might be like a Star Trek 4 reference.
I mean, but that's the only time I think of time travel when I think of Star Trek, really.
Yeah, like Star Trek did not build itself. Like, there's been a couple of Star Trek time travel things. There's been like a few, but like especially in '94, like by that point, like Back to the Future, I think would be like your predominant time travel thing,
or
like
maybe Terminator.
I mean, even at that point, Bill and Ted is come and gone. Like, I don't know how big. I don't know if that was like a.
I would have loved if the senator would have referenced Bill and Ted. Be
That's
excellent
how
to each
I'm
other.
hip and stay up with the kids. Yeah, well, be excellent to each other, Senator. But yeah, I like obviously like Star Trek 4. I was trying to think of when Star Trek 4 came out. 86. So like that was a good 8 years before this movie. But there's definitely some episodes of the original series that do it hard. But still, like you said, that's semantics. When I say time travel, the first franchise I think of is not Star Trek. I guess he was just making like a generic science fiction joke, which doesn't make you look like less of a jerk, bud.
You know what always does come up when people talk about time travel, though? Always. What's the number one thing that comes up, Andrew?
Killing baby Hitler.
Killing Hitler. Always. Never fails. And it's usually explaining why you can't do that. But everybody just assumes, the first thing you'll do is go kill Hitler, which I'm not here to say that's right or wrong, but I just feel like there's like a screenwriting class that teaches like, whenever you talk about time travel, when you're explaining it, you have to explain that you can't kill Hitler. The one time they avoid it is in Avengers Endgame. They just replace Hitler with Thanos. Right.
They explain. Well, and then they explain. We've talked about this endlessly, and that's a whole different show in its regard. But the contrivance they used for time travel in that movie meant it wouldn't work anyway. That was the whole point. But yeah, they explain in this movie that yeah, you could. I forget even what exactly it is they say, but they definitely use it as like a. But you don't know if it's going to be better. Like
yeah. They did the whole butterfly effect thing, right?
Right.
I mean, you go back and you step on a cockroach and it changes the world. Blah 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 blah. Typical time travel stuff. The movie does a good job of not getting lost in the weeds with that stuff.
Right.
They just kind of address it and move on. Which I admit, I have a hard time watching a lot of time travel movies because I'm trying to. I mean, maybe I'm watching them wrong, but I'm trying to like follow the rules that the movie sets for itself, and almost always they break their own rules, and it drives me crazy. But this movie avoids a lot of that. Like it's a time travel movie, it's sci-fi, but just we're here to set up these awesome action scenes. Like it doesn't get bogged down to the minutia of it too much.
I agree. And I think that's kind of the best way to do it, because like you I feel like that's where movies run into a problem, is when they try to get like too technical or like quote unquote realistic with time travel. Like time travel is not a real thing. So like when you break it down and try to use it as like a real scientific concept, I think you'll almost inevitably run into like problems, because I'm not saying you can't take it seriously, but like when you get bogged in the minutia, you just, like you said, you create these things that the movie inevitably doesn't follow. Even Back to the Future is guilty of it. Everything is guilty of it. Like almost every single time travel movie has something where like it breaks its own rules. This is one of the ones where it doesn't get too deep in its own weeds, so there's no real rules to break, basically. And like you said, I appreciate that. It makes it a lot easier to just kind of sit back and enjoy it, and not be like, well, wait a second, and like start nitpicking and trying to figure out the minutia of the time travel. And yeah, for a movie that's about time travel, I think this one has use Timecop as your template, people. This is how you do it.
And I thought they were setting up something very convoluted, because at that scene at the mall, it's Jean-Claude Van Damme meeting up with his wife. They're having a sweet little scene, and I thought they were setting something up very Back to the Future-ish, because someone takes their picture and hands it to her, and she's like, here,
yes,
hold on to this. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. That picture is going to be like his compass through the time traveling, and people are going to disappear, but it never comes up again. It was just a nice, just a nice
photo of him and his wife. It's yeah, because I thought the same. I was like, there's no way they're going to do the Back to the Future picture thing, are they? I was like, you can't do it like that, obviously. But no, that just kind of ends up being the last picture of him and his wife together before she dies, and he just hangs on to it for that. And I was like, oh, well, that's nice. I mean, it's sad, but it's nice.
It's a nice moment, and the movie cuts a very hard cut from this mall scene, this nice sweet mall scene, to a bedroom with candles everywhere and passionate lovemaking in the bed, not under the sheets. You see a lot of
Jean-Claude Max
man
Walker.
ass. you see a lot of both of these actors, and it is I oh boy. Hashtag PP. I'm not the biggest fan of of graphic sex scenes in movies. I never really think it's adding to anything in the movie, but that aside, it's just such a hard cut.
It's like a very hard cut, yeah.
Fully clothed people just talking to,
bam,
here we go. Yes.
I always love... Go ahead. Yeah.
You go ahead. What do you always love?
No. I just always love when these things are set up so intricately. Like, I just love, like, you've got all the candles, you've got everything set up, and the notion that they had to set all that up before they got started is always hilarious to me. Like, it's like,
you gotta wrap things up before that wax starts getting everywhere and those candles reach the bottom too.
Unless all 27 candles are lit, this just is not gonna be... It's not going to work for me. This is not going to function right. So I just always like, anytime I see a movie where there's something elaborate like that set up, I was like, man, like, how did you just have this ready to go? Like, did you know? Like, how is this going? Like, do you just have these set up ready to go, like, just in case? Like, and then you can just like go through with a Zippo and you're set? I don't know, but that's always funny to me.
And then the movie does it again, Andrew. Later on, there's this hard cut from like a normal scene at the police station or the TEC headquarters.
Oh, yeah.
To a naked woman in a bed, like by herself, like writhing around very sexually, like full frontal nudity, like playing to the camera. And we have no context for what's going on. It lasts a good while until it cuts back to TEC headquarters, and we see that it's like their IT guy in his virtual reality.
At work
for like, no particular reason.
Like
you're at
of
work.
All the places you would do this. Why would you do it at work? Like, especially when you're like sitting at your desk. Like, if you're gonna do that, go to the stall in the bathroom. Like, don't just sit at your desk and let somebody walk up to you. Like,
it does lead to a great line though. The commander walks up and he's like berating him for doing that, as he should. He's at work.
Right.
But Jean-Claude Van Damme says, looks like safe sex to me.
My favorite part of that is that line is the first thing he says right after, I'm never funny.
Yeah, and that's hilarious.
He's like, he says, "I'm never funny," and then it's immediately he's like, "Knock it off," and he's like, "Sounds like safe sex to me," and I was like, so you're a liar too, Jean-Claude Van Damme.
You beautiful bastard.
Never change.
So let's talk about 2004 in this movie. The distant future. I mean, first off, they could have gone farther. They just go 10 years into the future. Like when they're writing this story, I mean, they're like, all right, the movie comes out in 94, so let's set the future in 2004. I mean, they could have done 2024, but I guess then you've got to like age up Jean-Claude.
Well, yeah,
Van
and at this
Damme,
point, it's not
problem.
just it's the villain plot too. It's the senator running for
Oh, that's
president.
true.
So I think they were trying to like build that as to like what would be a fairly not enough time that somebody could blow up on like a national scene, and that's more than enough. And so I think that just made for an easy solution. Like I said, you could have taken it to like 2014 or whatever, but
Despite only being 10 years,
they had a lot of faith.
A lot of advancements in technology. A lot of faith. Andrew, they nailed it. I mean, now 2004 is in the past, so we got to think back. Remember in 2004 when obviously we're well past rectangular cassettes. Now we listen to music on square cassettes that you put into a Walkman to listen to music, right?
Yeah.
That's in 2004. We've evolved more since then.
Right. I was going to say, I definitely remember in 2004, just like CDs were a thing of the past at that point. Like you didn't listen to CDs anymore. You got these square cartridges, and they held upwards of 27 minutes of music.
Remember 2004, whenever it was the year of self-driving cars. There was problems.
Right, yeah.
We moved on since then, but we gave it the old college try in 2004.
We did.
All cars were shaped like rhombuses, no windows to the outside, just a bunch of computers and monitors on the inside.
Yeah, even on the outside, it just looked like, I would hate if it started raining while you were riding in one of those cars. It just sounds like you're asking for trouble. But yeah, he gets in the car and he said home. And that was, I remember Toyota had commercials about it. You could program in these designs and it knew where to go. And it was, the millions of lives lost was a tragedy, but it was a really thoughtful experiment while it lasted.
Of course, Jean-Claude gets home in 2004 and he just says out loud to no one in particular, television. And the TV pops on and it plays the home videos that he wanted to be watching at that time. Now, we're joking around, but that one's kind of close, I guess. That's kind of like Siri or Google Assistant, right? He didn't have to say, I'm going to whisper this, "Hey, Google." Because if I say that out loud, all my Googles are going to go off. But he didn't even have to say that. He just said television.
I can like go to I can be like, hey, Google, play X movie on Chromecast, and it will start playing a movie on the Chromecast on the TV. So I mean,
I could say play Timecop.
Yeah,
play Timecop on Living Room TV, and we would get it.
And we'd get it, and it would go. And so, it only took us an additional 18 years to get that, but we did get there. That's the only problem when you go to the future and you do lofty technology and it's only 10 years later. I was like, you've got a lot of faith in our advancement as a society.
They leaped as much as like Demolition Man leaped, and they went forward, I don't know, like 100 years in that movie. It was forward in that movie.
It's definitely something where like I always find it funny to like, especially like passage of time, like you watch any movie set in the future and like the cars always like the cars are the ones we seemingly have gotten the most wrong consistently. Like we keep assuming that like self-driving cars or flying cars or like suddenly all cars are going to have bay doors like DeLoreans for no reason, even though they're horrible and impractical. Like it's always so funny to get cars are the things that are like so egregiously wrong. Like the idea of like speaking commands now and stuff like that, that's not out of the question, especially with a lot of the smart home stuff, but cars are the ones that, like I said, the faith is appreciated, but it just wasn't there.
The CG, we talked about the CG bit in the finale. It's a bit rough, but it's 1994. Yeah. What are you going to do? But other than that, I think they use it a bit sparingly and pretty well. Particular whenever they arrive in the past, there's kind of just this ripple, and they walk out of the ripple. It's kind of like the Stargate, maybe is the closest thing to compare it to. but instead of being like this, again, Capri Sun liquid,
Yeah.
the environment itself is what ripples, and they just walk out of the environment. So it's not like a visible portal. They just sort of appear. And it's a very simple effect, which means it's easy to pull off without looking too wonky. I think it's a smart use of that very limited budget, and it works.
I agree. I actually thought that was a really cool, you can tell it's different. You can tell they're coming from somewhere and they just appear. I have no idea how they get out of the vehicle into the walkthrough bubble. That's the one thing I'm not entirely sure about. But, because as the movie shows, they basically launch them at a super high speed, and then the ship they're in disappears into a similar ripple. But then they come out of the ripple with no vehicle, but then return to the present in the vehicle. So I'm not sure on the logistics of that part of it, but I
mean, it's time travel. It can be whatever you want. It doesn't exist. Sure, that's how it works, right? I don't know. I don't know.
No, and they mentioned they've got these, locate and return beacons. So it might be that, the car stays, somewhere, and then they just return to the car and it returns them. Whatever. It's not gonna stop me from enjoying. This movie's rad as hell.
The time travel car that launches, presumably hitting the right speed, like Back to the Future, before it disappears. It's on a track, kind of like a roller coaster, and it's heading straight for a concrete wall. But if all goes right, they travel back in time before it smashes into the wall. And I gotta wonder, why have a wall there? Why not just not have a wall? So if things go wrong, you don't die. I do like there's shots of their faces as they are traveling back in time, and it's Jean-Claude Van Damme and his new partner, who again is new to this thing. This is her first time traveling back in time, and there's these close-ups of their faces. They go faster and faster, and it starts really warping the film. Their eyes are bulging out, and there's this quick shot of Jean-Claude Van Damme. I have to go back and screen capture because his face is stretched across the entire bottom of the frame. It's like that scene in Guardians 2 whenever Rocket and Yondu are leaping too many times and they get all warped out of place. It's, again, not super necessary, but it's just a hilarious little shot that I appreciated.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see, because different movies, kind of establish that the effects of time travel on a person are very different. Ultimately, when they get to wherever they're going, there seem to be no, adverse effects. Obviously, Back to the Future, the car is, covered in ice the first times. It's just cold. It's all that. And so it was interesting, they're not... It's the process of traveling is not painless. Obviously, when you get there, you're fine, but the process of time traveling is not always enjoyable. And little touches like that, you're thinking about it. You're trying to create something a little unique. I always like that.
Andrew, I've got just one last note here that's very important that we get out there. It's kind of not even about the movie. I started the movie, and this hasn't happened to me in a long time, but it happened here. And you get your production studios have their logos, and then the movie starts, and there's this huge tidal wave coming at the screen, the shot of the ocean. I'm like, okay, this is an interesting way to start. And then it says Intermedia Productions, and I'm like, oh, damn it, this was just another production studio logo. They get so carried away with how dramatic those are. It's hard to tell when the movie's starting sometimes.
There's a Japanese studio that does superhero stuff. It's called Toei, Toei. They do all the Super Sentai Kamen Rider stuff. But their production stinger is the same kind of thing. It's just a beach and just waves cresting, and then their logo comes up. But again, if you're not paying attention, you're just going to be like, oh, what are we doing here? What's with the beach, guys? What's going on? And then you're like, oh, nope. Just show me the company name. Gotcha.
Well, Andrew, like we said in the beginning, this movie is technically based on a comic book, a short story published by Dark Horse Comics. Now, even though this movie is pretty popular, made a decent amount of the box office, it certainly had a bit of a cult following afterwards, spawned an entire franchise, you could say, with a TV show and a sequel. Those original comics, I don't hear much about. It doesn't seem like they tried to revive it into an ongoing comic, or even republished it as a standalone Timecop comic. So normally I like to ask you how the movie functions as an adaptation of the source material, which, given that it's the same writer, I gotta imagine it's done pretty well. But it's hard to even compare if you can't find that original comic, yeah?
Yeah, I have not read them, so I'm not even really going to try to make comparisons. Obviously, with the writing team being Mike Richardson and Mark Verheiden, I think it's fair enough to say that they had a lot of control over how the story got presented. I've never really tried to seek them out. I think there's been maybe a few little one-off kind of similar stories over the years, but yeah, like you said, nothing that's like, there was not some ongoing Timecop comic for decades. There's not been any major revival. It's kind of that thing that every few years they're like, oh, well, let's do another Timecop story, because they brought back Dark Horse Presents for a while, so I wouldn't have been shocked if it maybe popped up there. But yeah, it just doesn't feel like this was something that they really did a whole lot with. Maybe there wasn't much to do. Maybe they didn't feel that there was too much more to go with the story without starting to get redundant, cyclical, cliche. I don't know. But yeah, not a lot of knowledge there. Maybe one day I'll go see if I can find them. But otherwise, I will enjoy that it birthed us this film, because this movie is awesome.
I gotta say, Andrew, it's nice whenever a movie for this podcast is kind of a treat when it's a movie like Timecop. I mean, I enjoy watching all the movies
Sure.
we have to cover for Best of the Rest. I'm always, hashtag PP looking for the positives and everything. But a movie like this, it's almost like we get a week vacation, right? It's just everything's
it really
awesome.
does.
Let's talk about how awesome everything is.
Yeah, this is an awesome movie. I think it's genuinely enjoyable. And like I said, I know we're talking about some of this stuff like it's just ridiculous. You can't help it. But like, this is not like an ironic love. I really want to like stress that. This is just genuinely a cool movie that uses Jean-Claude Van Damme exactly the way he should be used. I think that's one of the best parts of it, is like it's putting him in a place where the movie builds around him in like the most organic way possible. And I think that's really well done. And also, just a quick shout out that if you do enjoy Timecop, I also do recommend the follow-up that Jean-Claude Van Damme, not a follow-up to the movie, but the director and Jean-Claude Van Damme re-teamed for a movie called Sudden Death the Next Year, which is one of the variety of the Die Hard in X location riffs, but it happens in a hockey arena. So, and it's got Powers Booth as the villain. So I also think that is an above average take on that concept, and dare I say, better than some of the actual Die Hard installments. So,
well, yeah, I mean, you take
more,
that schmuck Bruce Willis out of it, replace him with Jean-Claude Van Damme. That's an upgrade right there.
That's an upgrade right there. But yeah, if you're a fan of Jean-Claude Van Damme kind of being put in a very effective situation for his abilities, I think that's another good one to check out.
I also think it's funny that if you enjoyed this movie, you might also enjoy Double Impact, which is another Jean-Claude Van Damme movie where you get Jean-Claude Van Damme acting alongside Jean-Claude Van Damme, which he did a few years before this movie. So it's not even the first time we've had multiple Jean-Claude Van Dammes on screen at the same time.
Yeah, and so, there's, like I said, I genuinely think Jean-Claude Van Damme does not get the attention that he should sometimes. I'm not saying he's the greatest actor of all time. I'm not saying that he is not necessarily improperly slotted as number 3 behind Stallone and Arnold. I'm just saying that there's probably some pretty cool Jean-Claude Van Damme movies that you haven't watched.
I agree, Andrew. And now we're going to turn our focus over to our Discord really quick. And again, if you haven't joined our Discord, there's a link in the show notes. Go ahead and click on it. Hop on in. If you've never used Discord before, it's very simple. It's just a place for communities to get together, hang out, talk about cool stuff. So you can talk with us about movies or past episodes or really anything you want. You can also ask us questions to be featured on the podcast during our question of the week. And this week, our question comes from Mike Lynch there in the Discord. So thank you, Mike. Andrew, here's this question. He says, how would you like it if I hauled you two downtown? He has a real question after this. I just wanted to get your reaction to that, but it's not recorded because it's
just gonna screen cap on my face. No, yeah, all right. I guess This is how we're playing it, Chris. I see.
Personally, I would be like, this has to be some weird, surreal dream. Like a listener from the podcast is arresting me. We're going downtown. Like, let's wake up here. Mike, put another question in the Discord. Let's maybe take a look at that one. He says, after Joker did it in The Dark Knight, can you name how many other movie bad guys were caught on purpose to complete their devious plot? That's almost like a trivia question. I feel like I'm really on the spot here.
Yeah.
So a bad guy getting caught on purpose. First thing that comes to mind for me is I think you could say that happens in The Usual Suspects, right? Kind of the end of that movie.
that was what I was thinking. Verbal,
that nameless
definitely.
actor that's in that movie.
Yeah. I can't think of anything about him. That's definitely the big one that like comes to mind immediately. Man, that's a good question.
Oh, what about Avengers? Loki gets caught on purpose, right? To go onto the airship and
is that on
agitates
purpose?
the Hulk. Well, there's that big scene where Black Widow is like interrogating him, and his plan to find out his plan is to release the Hulk.
Yeah, I think that counts.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I feel like there's definitely other examples. This is
no,
something
those
I
are the
might have
only
to sleep
3
on.
times.
Yeah,
bad
in the
guys
history of
caught
cinema.
on purpose.
I feel like I think there's more, but like I think I just watched The Dark Knight recently, and I think I just have Gordon in my head being like, unless he wanted to be caught.
Yeah,
but I feel like this is definitely something that's happened more often. I'm just trying to like, I might have to sleep on that one. That's a. Yeah, I feel very on the spot. I'm sorry I let you down. Like I feel like I failed miserably here.
I think we had a couple high points. Well, certainly I'm going to be thinking about it all week, and I'll probably drop some more answers as I think of them in the Discord. But yeah, Usual Suspects, Avengers, Dark Knight. Yeah,
that's a good question. That's a really good
important
question, though. That's like props to you, Mike Lynch. Your possible relative David Lynch would be impressed.
We will continue to chew on this one. If you have examples that we cannot think of right now, let us know. Twitter @BOTRcast, any other social media platform. Jump into our Discord, wherever you want. We're easy to get a hold of. Let us know how dumb we are because we didn't think of X movie where the bad guy gets caught on purpose as part of his devious plan. And until then, remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram @NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch of Depressed to Impress for the music. Check him out on YouTube and Twitch.tv. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media @BOTRcast. Thank you. Also in this movie, we have Mia Sarah. That's her name, right?
Yes.
I turned into a Looney Tune for a second.
Sitting at your desk. Like, if you're gonna do that, go to the stall in the bathroom. Like, don't just sit at your desk and let somebody walk up to you. Like, do it in the shame of the dark, like the rest of us.
Jesus, Andrew. And the
sorry.
All cars were shaped like parallelograms. What is that?
Rhombus.
Rhombus, thank you. I'm cutting that. And until then, remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Are you Googling it right now, Andrew?
I am, actually. Skyfall?
I feel like we're cheating here, Andrew.
You don't have to include these. You don't have to include these. Like, I'm genuinely just like, I was like, I know this has happened more often. But Skyfall is one because Javier Bardem gets captured on purpose.
Does he?
Oh, okay. Look,
I'm going to take your word for it.
The line here is movies in which the villain gets captured as part of the plan. And Thor: The Dark World, Star Trek in the Darkness.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. The Avengers is on here. The Dark Knight Rises. where the beginning is Bane getting caught on purpose.
Well, he's already been caught, so I don't know. It
7.
opens with him caught, you know?
Yeah,
How do we know
but that
But yeah, it ends up being part of his plan. I got you.
part of his plan. They say 7, the whole ending of 7.
Oh, yeah, another Kevin Spacey. Damn it. That one I should have thought
God
of.
damn it. Dark Knight, Silence of the Lambs, actually. He negotiates for a different relocation and then ends up. So, yeah. It's like, it's not part of the villain plot, though, really.
Yeah.
And then Skyfall. Is that Bardem that gets caught? Yeah.
Okay, let me record the end credits here.
Yeah. Sorry. I just genuinely was like, I know this has happened more often. I'm like, this is pissing me off.
Seven's only one I feel like I should have thought of. The other ones are like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I guess technically. Okay.